Hello and welcome to Chapter 2, Part 2, where we talk about the organic compounds. Organic compounds are substances that have carbon in them, and they're usually seen as the chemistry of living matter. Organic compounds are broken down into main groups: carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. As we go through this, I would like you to take a moment, stop the video, and make a chart that looks like this, and then we can summarize as we go. We're going to talk about carbohydrates and lipids, and then proteins, and probably get more nucleic acids in the third chapter, but a little bit about nucleic acids now. So take a moment and make this chart, and then when you're done, turn me back on again, and we will continue. Okay, the first type of organic compound we're going to look at are the carbohydrates. Now, carbohydrates are seen as short-term and long-term storage and energy. So you can have energy quickly with a simple carbohydrate, and then they can be stored to be a complex carbohydrate, and that's where you have your polysaccharides. Now, the neat thing about biologists is they count 1, 2, and many. So monosaccharide is 1 sugar. Disaccharide is 2 sugars together. And then you get to a polysaccharide, which is a complex molecule with many sugars. Glucose is the one main saccharide that is mainly used as a repeating unit. When you have 2 glucose or an isomer of glucose, being fructose, together, you have disaccharide. And this example of the disaccharide here is sucrose, which is regular table sugar. Then when you put all these building blocks and you build many of them together, you can have a polysaccharide. There's 3 main polysaccharides that we look at. This one is a branched polysaccharide. This is glycogen. Glycogen is how glucose is stored in the liver in animals. You could also have it in glycogen is branched, takes up a lot of room. You can have a straight chain where there's no branching, all again glucose molecules arranged with all their little flags put the same way. That will produce starch, and starch is a storage molecule, especially in plants, such as carrots and potatoes are very starchy. That's the storage for plants. Then you can have them so these little flags alternate, and you end up with cellulose. Cellulose is a polysaccharide that humans cannot digest. It's the stringy stuff in celery, but it is very useful in roughage to clean out our colon. It is used more for structure, especially in plants. Okay, so carbohydrates are, the repeating unit is a glucose. They build together to form di and polysaccharides. They're mainly used for short-term energy or long-term energy storage. Okay, the next group we're going to look at is the lipids. Lipids are usually seen as fats, but there's 3 classifications of lipids. There's the triglyceride, which is the fats and oils. There's the phospholipids, which are very important in maintaining membranes, and there are steroids, and steroids are ringed compounds. When you look at the structure, first off, let's talk about function. Not all fat is bad. You need a wee bit of fat because some fat insulates your body. It protects your organs. The cushy parts on your hands and feet are fat. It also is a good way to store energy. Too much fat is a problem, but a little is needed there. Then you have phospholipids. We'll talk about the structure of phospholipids in a bit. They are the components of cell membranes. And then you have steroids, which are ring compounds. Steroids are usually related to things like hormones, especially the sex hormones. When you look at the structure of lipids, lipids have a glycerol backbone, and glycerol has 1, 2, 3 carbons in it. So you've got 3 carbons, and then if you have fatty acid chains coming off, 3 fatty acids, you end up with what's called a triglyceride because you have 3 fatty acids coming off. The fatty acids can all have single bonds and be saturated, or it can have this carbon-carbon double bond, and this is unsaturated. This unsaturated fat will be usually take up more space because it's a kinked molecule. This is a lipid or a simple fat. The second group is a triglyceride. The second group is a phospholipid, which is not here. The phospholipid has one of these lipids is replaced with a phosphate group. As a result, the phospholipid is usually seen as having a tail. Seen as having a tail and a polar head and two nonpolar tails. Very important in membranes. We'll talk about it more when we talk about the membranes in chapter 3. Here you have the steroids, which are ringed compounds. Each one of these corners on this ringed compound is a carbon molecule. So this is an example of a steroid. Again, steroids still have your where's your 3? Your glycerol molecule is still the backbone in a steroid molecule. Okay? The third group is proteins. Proteins contain nitrogen, and proteins are the building blocks of the cell. The protein has a very basic structure, and then it's got this R group. This R group is based on, there are 20 amino acids, and each one of these amino acids has a different R group. Everything else is the same. You've got an amino group, which is the nitrogen with 2 hydrogen, and you've got your acid group, which is a C double bonded O. When these come together, one hydrogen is taken off of the nitrogen group and an OH is taken off the acid group, and you form a peptide bond. And this is how the amino acids join together to form a dipeptide. Dipeptides then form polypeptides, and polypeptides form proteins. The thing about proteins is shape matters. So with the interaction of these R groups, they can form pleated sheets or they can form alpha helixes. Then the interaction continues to fold and form these 3-dimensional proteins. These 3-dimensional proteins are very important because they have a special shape and a special function. This one looks like hemoglobin, and the red dot is the iron, which holds the oxygen molecules. So hemoglobin is a very specialized protein. Enzymes are also specialized proteins. Enzymes are proteins that will speed up chemical reactions, and they work for a specific reaction. They work kind of a lock and key mechanism. So each protein is a specialized lock, and then the key comes in, fits together. Now, the whole idea of an enzyme is to increase the activity of increase the reaction, but it doesn't take part in the reaction. The third classification is nucleic acids. And nucleic acids are built with nucleotides. Nucleotides have a nitrogen base and a sugar and a phosphate. And the sugar and phosphate is the backbone of the DNA. The only thing changes in the DNA are these nitrogen bases. We'll get more into that in chapter 3. When you look at your nucleotide, which is the building block of your nucleic acid, you have your nitrogen base and you have your sugar phosphate backbone. One example of a nucleotide that we've heard a lot about is the nucleotide ATP, adenosine triphosphate. You have your adenosine, which is your nitrogen base. You have your ribose, which is your sugar. And then you have 3 phosphate groups. As you put these phosphates on, energy helps build it. So this is a way to break apart the energy. Okay, take a second and finish your chart. Okay, here is a summary of your biological molecules. Carbohydrates used for energy. What I want you to realize is that all biological molecules have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in them. When you get to a protein, you have that nitrogen group, and then you also have your R groups, and the R groups have phosphate and sulfur in it. Carbohydrates are mainly used for structure in plants, energy, and energy storage. We talked about the repeating molecule, which is a monomer. In this situation, it's glucose. Dihydrolysis synthesis is the molecule, the process that builds. You'll have to look that one up for more detail. It's basically taking off the water and building things together. Then, or I'll put a clip of, there's a video on it. Then you have lipids. Lipids are the second category. Energy storage, insulation, protection, vitamin absorption. You also have membranes and hormones with the steroids. With lipids, they all have a glycerol backbone. With your triglycerides, you have 3 fatty acids. With your phospholipid, you have 2 fatty acids, and one of the backbone, or one of the fatty acids is replaced with phosphate. Then you have steroids, which are ringed one. They can be saturated or unsaturated, steroids and phospholipids. The examples here are fats, oils, estrogen, and cholesterol are steroids because they have rings. Then when you look at proteins, proteins are the building blocks. They are such things as hair and skin. You also have enzymes. They're also used for transport aids, such as hemoglobin is a transport aid, and the protective coverings such as hair, skin. You've got the building blocks of a protein is the amino acids. That's a repeating unit. You put amino acids together, you get a peptide. You put many peptides together, you get a polypeptide. And then as the polypeptides and the proteins grow, they have the primary sequence, which is the list of the amino acids. Secondary has to do with coiling and pleating. Tertiary, they become a glob. And quaternary, they're a multi-globular protein, such as hemoglobin. In nucleic acids, we talked about those very briefly. They control the genetic information. They can also be energy molecules such as ATP. With a nucleotide, the nucleotide is a repeating unit, and it is made of a sugar, a phosphate, and a nitrogen base. The nitrogen bases will change, and that's the adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine that we'll talk about when we talk more about DNA and RNA. That's a pretty quick wrap up. Take time to read more about your molecules. You pretty much just need to know this information, but it's nice to know a little bit more background. Take care.